Welcome to Subaru Ecu Flash Training Part 10. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at working with our closed and open loop operation a little bit further. The last video, we started to introduce the concept of how it worked and some basic details. We're going to dig in a little bit deeper, making sure that we've covered now the long-term fuel trim operation and making sure that it doesn't affect our wide open throttle fueling, and then connecting to an actual vehicle using live data demonstration and showing what to look for in real time, whether to determine closed or open loop operation. We have a lot to cover in this training tutorial. Let's jump in so we can check this out.
Okay, so let's get started. We're going to be taking a look at working with closed and open loop fuel correction within our 16-bit Subaru applications. Now, the last video, we looked at the open and closed loop operation. We looked at a data log. We looked what to determine whether we're in closed or open loop. This video, I'm going to take things a step further. We're going to be doing a live demonstration looking at closed and open loop operation and specifically honing in on channels for logging purposes to determine exactly what is going on. We actually have a very specific situation we have to be aware of where the long-term fuel trim can start to affect into our high RPM boost situations where the air fuel may never be consistent because the actual long-term fuel trim is applying itself, which is something we want to avoid. I'm going to show you exactly what to look for, what to edit within your calibration files so we can avoid having that issue during our tuning. Now, we will be moving into further training tutorials here very shortly, taking a look at doing the actual tuning with mass airflow or speed density operation, but it's imperative that we understand this fundamental idea of moving from closed to open loop and what parameters we need to look for to determine what is going on so that we can avoid having any calibration problems as we move into those videos and as you do performing this on your own vehicle. So the very first thing I want to talk about here to kind of add on to the previous video, the previous training tutorial, when we were talking about closed and open loop operation. Now we understand that we have our air fuel correction number 1, that was our short-term fuel trim. We have our AF learning number 1, that's our long-term fuel trim. But there's a bit more to this picture of what's going on between closed and open loop, specifically in this closed loop operation, where we have our long-term trims being applied. And that's going to be our learning ranges. There's a learning range A, B, C, and D. We specifically want to make sure that air fuel learning number D, or air fuel learning number 1D, is not going to be affecting our full throttle operation, which it can. We have to do some tricks within the software in order to avoid having that apply, so we can still have short and long-term corrections being applied for idle and part throttle cruise area, but not applying itself into full throttle, which is a definite possibility and issue. You want to avoid that. So let's go quickly take a look at this. What I have open here within Ecu Flash is actually 2 files. We have a DW Carberry ROM. This is a Carberry based ROM. That's what's loaded into the vehicle right now that I'm working with and sitting in. We're doing a live demonstration. And we have a 2003 WRX stock equivalent file. Now the reason I have both of these files open, because when we're taking a look at our air fuel learning ranges, these will be differing based on one looking at load coming from our map sensor registration, and one here, the Carberry ROM, looking at our map sensor in terms of how the air fuel learning or the long-term fuel trim will apply in different ranges. So I wanted to make sure we cover our bases with either, depending on what you're going to be calibrating your Subaru with. So first thing I'm going to do here, let's actually just jump into a 2003 WRX example. If we scoot down here under current RAM metadata, what we're looking for is going to be our AF learning. So we see here fueling AF learning. We're going to find we have our AF learning limits. This is the positive and minus limits of how far the long-term fuel trim can actually change. These are the loggable channels that we can see when we're looking in our Rom Raider software. We're going to be visiting that and talking about that in just a little bit. So these parameters here, we can see the range is plus or minus essentially 15%. So long-term fuel trim can adjust itself by this much. Now these thresholds are relatively large. We don't want to see this much correction from our long-term fuel trim, but it's there in the event that we do have something off. Maybe we have a leak, maybe we have some other kind of problem in our fuel system. It does allow us the ability to change the actual injector pulse width by this much percentage. We also have this other table here, AF learning number 1 airflow ranges. This table is responsible for breaking down, looking at the long-term fuel trim and how it's going to be applying itself. What we're going to find here is that we have a max range A, min range B. This is going to be saying at 5.6 grams per second of airflow registration from our MAP sensor, it's going to be transitioning from essentially long-term field trim, AF learning number 1A, into the B range. And we'll see here then max range B, min range C. That's going to be transitioning between 5.6 and 10.0 grams per second. It'll transition into our max range C. And then we'll find it can then, between max range C, between 10 grams per second and then, in this case, 50 grams per second, it'll be in our range C, or AF learning number 1C range. And then it can transition above this 50 grams per second into our range D. And this is where we need to avoid and start to do some things here in the programming to make sure that that's not going to be learning in our AF learning number 1D range to affect our wide open throttle. Now these ranges here are sufficient to work with. We'll find that in terms of a stock vehicle, in terms of a 2.0 liter here, right around...
Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here. And you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.